And I won't take too long. I've got a few extra things to talk about today, but I won't take too long. Like I always say, they don't really want to hear me. They want to listen to you. So I hate turning into a session and tuning into a session, and then the speaker goes on for 10 minutes before you get to the topic. So. Oh, it's 11. Okay. I'll start in just a few seconds here. Let me be sure I've got myself set. Okay, here we go.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome to the DBA Fundamentals Virtual Chapter Meeting for September. Today we have Jes Borland presenting Moving from Profiler to Extended Events. I'm going to go over a few things, and then we'll turn it over to Jes as soon as I can. I'm Steve Cantrell, the co-chapter leader of the DBA Fundamentals Virtual Chapter. You can send us questions anytime by going to the About Us tab and going to on our website, which is fundamentals.sqlpass.org. We've got something a little new that we're kind of working with Pass on, and a gentleman out of Australia. We're going to give one session and see how it goes. He wants to give sessions in Australia, in the Australian time zone, which will help service people in that area of the world a little bit better. For instance, they're 15 hours ahead of us at Central Daylight Time, so it's going to be hard to think about, but these will be given. They've got some excellent speakers and excellent topics. We hope we can be a success, and we hope it can be convenient for you. We'll be given another past 2015 comp code after the session. Again, we'll send a list of the users that attended, their email, time in the session, and the attentiveness to Pass, and they, based on certain criteria, will pick a winner, and we'll notify you. We've yet to receive, to get in touch with the person that won the presentation or the comp code for August the 4th. So if you can, try to be sure you register with an email that you check every so often. Even if you're registering with an email that you use to register with, at least check your emails after the session. Usually we know within a couple of days afterwards who the winner is, because you'll want to go ahead and start planning. Pass has a lot of other great virtual chapters. Some of the highlighted sessions coming up. This was one I talked about last time on August the 19th. Questions and answers with David Klee on the virtualization chapter. That's going to be tomorrow, so be sure and check that out. That should be really good. It had gotten moved up, so and changed on the date. The business analytics chapter is going to be giving Power BI Mission Possible. That's on August the 26th. Again, we'll be giving another session away, and we'll be giving a presentation by Jonathan Cahes from SQL Skills, Going Asynchronous with Service Broker. I know that sounds like a title that's not really exciting, but the content is great. Jonathan's a great speaker, and it's something that not a lot of people talk about. It's something you might want to check out. Then on November the 8th, our new Australian time zone segment of our fundamentals will be giving away SQL Server Performance Tuning, Controlling Parallelism with Robert Davis. We are recording this session, and it should be available within a couple of days. If Jes will give us the scripts and the slide deck, we can post that also. So just keep looking, and I'll probably send out an email, and if it takes a few more extra days, I might wait until the first of next week. Okay. Let's go on to Jes. Jes will be presenting Moving from Profiler to Extended Events. Jes is a Senior SQL Server Engineer at Concurrency and a Microsoft SQL Server MVP. She holds an AAS Programmer Analyst degree, is a certified Microsoft Certified Professional in SQL Server 2012. I'm stumbling all over the place. And has worked with SQL Server as a developer, report writer, DBA, and consultant. She's a user group president, Tech on Tap founder, and a lessthan.com blogger. She frequently presents at user groups, SQL Saturdays, and other community events. She's also an avid runner and chef. Okay, over to you now, Jess.
Well, gosh, I need no introduction after that. So thank you, and thank you to everyone that's joining me for my new session, world premiere, of moving from Profiler to Extended Events. I will definitely get a copy of the slides and the code samples to you probably within an hour of the presentation. I say within an hour because I'm in Central Time and it's getting close to lunch too. So, as was mentioned, I'm Jes Borland, and I'm a Senior SQL Engineer. I'm an MVP, and I'm also a current consultant at DBA in my past life. And as a report writer, as a developer, as a DBA, guess what? Just like you, I used Profiler a lot, almost every day. I had my pre-configured traces that I could just, whip out that .SQL file, put in the file name that I wanted to save it to, start the trace on the server, and go. Then in SQL Server 2008, Extended Events came out. It was going to be the greatest. It was going to be the next best thing. And there was no GUI, and you had to know how to query XML using XQuery. I was out the door so fast, it couldn't have hit me if it had tried. SQL Server 2008 R2 came out. Woo, extended events, there's more talk about it. And again, no GUI, there's XQuery. I think I opened it up once for about half an hour and said, nope, not doing it. And then, about 3.5 years ago, SQL Server 2012 was released. Microsoft finally got the message that there needed to be some sort of user interface, that not everyone was willing to learn this complicated new T-SQL construct and XQuery to view the results of their extended event sessions. So since SQL Server 2012, I have started using extended events on a very regular basis. And as I was discussing before I started talking here with you guys, it wasn't an overnight thing though, right? It wasn't like one day I just said, I'm going to give up Profiler, I'm going to use extended events for everything. No, it was a slow, gradual process. So I understand that it's not going to be you guys logging in tomorrow saying I'll never open up Profiler again and using extended events from here on out. If you do, please let me know in about 6 months. Be happy to send you a batch of cookies or something as a thank you present. But what I want to do today is really get you thinking about using extended events and taking small steps towards getting away from Profiler. So let's talk about a trip back in time to 1998. In 1998, the premier operating system was Microsoft Windows 98. Think about it. We've just come out with Windows 10, several generations of operating system later. In 1998, a brand new startup was founded called Google. It promised to let you search anything on the internet. I think we all know what Google is now. It's obviously a huge company. And the hottest holiday toy in the world in 1998 was the Furby. Heck, even I had one of those. I think it lasted for about a year before someone stepped on it and broke it, maybe on purpose. So this has been a trip back in time. This is almost 20 years ago. You know what else debuted in 1998? Profiler in SQL Server 7.0. So SQL Server Profiler is, let's face it, showing its age a little bit. You wouldn't use Windows 98 for production anymore, I hope. Probably a few of you out there. So what are some of the reasons that are holding people back from converting from Profiler to extended events? You know, I've asked this question a ton of times over the last couple of years, and these are some of the answers I've gotten. Most people say, I can do everything that I need to do. Why should I learn a new tool? Okay, valid question. Here's my response. Profiler is going away. It's being deprecated. Microsoft says that in a future version of SQL Server, it won't exist. So eventually, you will need to learn a new tool. And as we'll see, extended events has some capabilities, Profiler doesn't. Ooh, how about this one? People love to use Profiler because I can save the data to a table automatically, and I can't do that with extended events. We'll talk about this objection a little bit later, but let's just say this is not the best reason to keep on with Profiler. Another common question or statement is that the extended events interface isn't exactly the same as Profiler. You know what? No, it's not. But remember in SQL Server 2000 we had Enterprise Manager, and then we moved over to Management Studio. We're not still using Enterprise Manager for managing databases, and the interface changed. I actually think the interface for extended events that came out with 2012 is much better, primarily because it's searchable. I can't do things like search through Profiler GUI to find the events I want to tag or the columns. I can do that with extended events. So it's one of these, modernization things. Times change, software changes. And then there was a comment I got recently that nearly broke my heart. I know Profiler is a separate program I open, but I don't even know how to open extended events. And I thought, self, this is when you need to start doing more teaching. Microsoft is clearly not getting the word out well enough. So if any of these objections apply to you, if any of these are thoughts you've had, thank you for joining me today to learn why you should be using extended events. So is extended events simpler than Profiler and traces? In some ways, no. Actually, my answer most of the time is no. You're thinking, Jess, you're not selling this very well. You know what? It still has several pieces to it. You're going to have to put in a little bit of work to learn things like what the events are that you can track. And once you pick an event, what actions can it trigger? What predicates or filters can it use? You have to learn what targets you can save your data to and read from. But once you've put in the work, you'll notice that it's well worth it. Is extended events more comprehensive? By far. One thing to note is that as Microsoft now introduces new features into SQL Server 2012, 2014, 2016, and beyond, it stopped adding new things to track to Profiler as of SQL Server 2008. If you want to track anything about these new features, you have to use extended events. And there's a lot of cool stuff you can monitor around availability groups and column store indexes, buffer pool extensions, in-memory OLTP. Extended events is much more comprehensive than Profiler, and once you start digging into what it can do, I'm sure you'll want to start using it. And then there's that question of, is extended events better? That's a loaded question because what does better really mean? I like to think that it performs a lot better. That would be the term to use. It is much less resource intensive. And we'll talk about why that is in a little bit. Again, it has more events that can be tracked, so in that way, it's better. And again, it's not deprecated, whereas Profiler is. So in that case, it's going to be better. So we're going to go ahead and talk about using extended events in real life. So when I first started putting this session together, I had this whole thing. I was going to give you guys like, here's what predicates are, and here are the building blocks of events and actions. And you know what? If you want that stuff, go out to Books Online and read through Microsoft's diagrams about how sessions are related to events which trigger actions. I'm going to talk about what we use Profiler for. Here are a few of the things that, as a DBA and even as a developer, I would normally go to Profiler for. Probably the most common example. The server's been really slow the last half hour. I can't figure out why. I think there's a long-running query, or I think there's a lot of queries going on, or we're trying to figure out if it's this application that's causing it. Can we run a Profiler trace to see what's running and how many resources they're using? Another common use of a Profiler session or a trace was deadlocks. You know your system's undergoing terrible performance, you want to capture the deadlocks, and the deadlock graph says they're happening, so you start up a trace. Finding login failures or any other sort of error or warning. At my last DBA position, I had a full-on trace set up just to capture like every single exception, error, user error, warning, just to see what was causing all of those. And maybe, as a DBA, one of the things that you might do is watch database activity, like data and log files growing tremendously or shrinking, trying to capture why you're running out of disk space every Wednesday at 4 a.m. Run a trace, check it in the morning. I'm going to let you in on a little bit of secret. Here are some common uses for extended events. That list looks awfully familiar. Almost everything that you could do in Profiler, with the exception of a couple of small things, which I'll address later, you can do with extended events. All of the different events that you are able to track in a Profiler session are available in extended events. It's a matter of learning how to take the actions that you're used to taking. It's all about the events that you're used to using and just translating them to this new language. So I think that the best way that I can show you how to dip your toe in the extended events pool is simply to go ahead and demo it. So I'm going to switch over, and I'm using, for the purposes of this demo, SQL Server 2014. What I'll show you could also be used with SQL Server 2012. Note, extended events was available in 2008 and 2008 R2. Like I said, I didn't really use it, and I still don't. It's unfriendly. I'm just going to say that. It's unfriendly. So let's say that we are going to run a Profiler session to capture all of the queries that are running our system. How would we go ahead and do this? We have extended events, or we don't have extended events open yet. We have SQL Server Management Studio open. We go to Tools and select SQL Server Profiler. And it opens a separate tool. We have to connect to our database. Note that I'm using a specific user, Profiler user. We'll talk about that and what the implications of that are and what rights it has here. So this is the typical system, interface that you're used to seeing. So I'm going to say this is capture all queries. No template because I want to create my own. I'm going to use the traditional save to file because I don't want to save it to table. I want to be able to compare how we view Profiler data versus how we view extended events data in the long run. So I'm going to say capture all queries. I can enable my max size. File rollover, yes. I'm not going to choose the option save to table, and I'm not going to choose the option trace stop time because I'll control that. Next thing we have to do is go to our event selection. As I mentioned, one of the downsides to this particular interface is no searching capabilities. I just kind of have to know where I'm going. Thankfully, there's a limited number of events in Profiler, and I've been using it for a long time, so I know where I'm going. Under stored procedures, I want to check stored procedures completing, remote procedure calls completed. I also want to check batch completed and statement completed. I have all events and all columns selected. If I wanted to go through and only get some of these, I would have to check an awful lot of boxes or uncheck an awful lot of boxes. So you know what? I think that's a lot of work, so I'm just going to skip it. I'll go through the data later. That means we're gathering potentially more data than we need to in the beginning. That's, in my opinion, the equivalent of a select star. And we all know how we should feel about a select star. One of the great things we can do is a column filters. I want to make sure that I am only capturing queries that are happening against my AdventureWorks 2012 database. All right, easy enough. I click Run. Is it going to capture data? Well, let's start a new query. You'll notice I'm connected as extended events user. That's not what I want. Let's change my connection to be myself. Use AdventureWorks. I'm going to break my own worst practices here and select from Big Product. Select star from Big Product. And switching back over to Profiler, we can see that it's captured our queries. You may occasionally leave this big window open, but typically we don't. We want to stop it because watching every statement scroll past, we know slows down performance. It drags things down. So typically we would say, okay, if it's a really quick, short, easy thing, we'll do a profiler session. Otherwise, we might make a server-side trace. To do that, we select Export Trace Definition for 2005 to 2014, and we're left with a .SQL file. I'm going to open that up because I want you to, if you've never really seriously looked at the .SQL created by a profiler trace, take a look at this now and think about this. If you were just to come in and look at a trace that someone else sent you, how do you go about figuring out what information they're capturing? What events are being tracked here? What columns are being collected? You would have to go through and sort out what events 41 and 12 and 43 and 10 are. In short, the profiler data is only good through the GUI. There isn't an easy way to tell through the trace file which is the preferred method to do it. So that's profiler in a nutshell. That's what you've been doing. That's what I did for a long time. Let's compare that to extended events. So if you've never used extended events before, pay attention. Hang on, we're going in. So how do I start an extended events session? First question most people have. You're going to do it right from Management Studio and right here in Object Explorer. So you're going to connect to your database, or your server, I'm sorry, and note that I'm logged in here as Extended Events user. To access extended events, I'm going to expand the Management tab, and then I see extended events listed there. By expanding extended events, I can see what sessions are already created on the server, and those that have that little red dot are stopped. The ones with the tiny green arrow, which you probably can barely see because I can barely see it, meaning that they're currently running. That is how you open extended events. That's how you get to it. Easy enough. There's not even a separate tool. So how do we go ahead and start a new session or create something new? Easy enough. We can right-click, and we have a couple of options. New Session Wizard or New Session. I don't know why they decided to call this one New Session, but it's honestly the way I prefer to start. So I call this the New Session Dialog or the New Session Unwizard, and that's how I like to go through and create extended events. And it's essentially a wizard. You'll notice there are 4 options going down the left-hand side that we're just going to fill in, and they're the main features. We have to fill in our events, we have to fill in our targets, and then we just check some things around memory. I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I did with my profiler session to extended events. I'm going to say capture all queries. It defaults to a blank template. Thank you. I unchecked that option almost every time I went into the profiler GUI. Sweet. Good news though, if you are a fan of profiler templates, if you have carefully scripted out your traces and you regularly use them, yes, you can absolutely do that here in extended events. There's even a group that are built in. I've used the query batch sampling, query detail tracking, query weight statistic quite a few times. Other options, started at server startup or started immediately after session creation. Those are some options we didn't have in Profiler. I'm going to set this to started immediately after session creation. It's really all I need to do on this screen. Now I click on the second one, which is events. Yes, this looks different than the Profiler tab did, but it's all the same information. And even better, it's searchable. So if I were to scroll through this list, I would eventually find almost all of the same things that I see in Profiler. Even better though, I can search. So if I just type in SQL, I can see that I already have, without having to scroll down, my batch completed, my statement completed. What if I wanted RPC completed? I can just search RPC and, there it is, RPC completed. Wait, maybe I should just search for things that have complete. I love this feature of the Extended Events New Session dialog box. Makes it super easy to find things if I know what event I'm looking for. Few things to note. When you're wondering what information it's going to collect, right, the equivalent of all of those little check boxes that you could check in the Profiler GUI, it's down here under Event Fields with a description. So when I choose RPC completed, it's going to collect data stream, output parameters, CPU time, logical reads, physical reads, and more. Now to specify that I want to add this to the particular session, I click this little arrow over here. And there we go. I am now going to be tracking the RPC completed event. Other things that I want, SP statement completed, SQL batch completed, SQL statement completed. And that is how I add my events to my extended events session. A few other things to show you about this because, again, I think this is a neat screen. You'll notice that there are categories. I can actually make it a little bit easier to, if I don't know exactly what I'm looking for, I can choose a particular category and view just the items for that category. In a database, I can see when we have checkpoint begin and end. I can see if a database is created. I can see page splits. I can see a lot of other information, and if you're not sure what it does, you can just look in this description box to find out. As I mentioned, there are newer features introduced in 2012 and 2014 that you cannot track with Profiler. You can view those in extended events. Viewing availability groups, I use the always on category. I can see when replica states are, I can see what a replica's state is. I can see when a replica state has changed. I can see when there's been automatic failover. So by spending a little bit of time looking through here, you'll be able to find out what events you can use and play around with it a little bit. Check out what's there. Now, when you're using the screen, don't just go ahead and click data storage. There's a wealth of more information hidden up here in this tiny little button up at the top called Configure. Click on it. This is where we get into the really good stuff. We grab our global fields, our predicates, and our event fields. Interestingly enough, I'm the type that will start this in reverse. So I like looking at event fields. So you'll notice if I click on RPC completed, this is the information that's going to be captured, SP statement completed, SQL batch completed, SQL statement completed. So there are some that are optional. For example, with SP statements completed, the name of the object is optional. I can check that if I want to grab that as one of the fields. Next up is filter. So one note here about things like global fields and filters. It helps to select all of the items if you want all of the same filters. All you have to do there is do a control click or a shift click, just like any other multi-select. To add a filter, we select our field. Tons of things to filter on here. Some ways I've used this, grabbing queries that have more than 100,000 logical reads. Queries with more than 10,000 milliseconds of CPU time. But down here there are more frequent things like database ID and database name. We can grab on any of the other global fields that are going to be grabbed to client application name. If you know something as specific as a plan handle or a query plan hash. But to set this up just like our profiler session, we just say database name AdventureWorks 2012. And then we can go back to that global fields or actions. So I think actions is a terrible name for this part of extended events. To me, action implies that once a stored procedure statement completed, then this would happen. It's not necessarily that. I think global fields is slightly better naming. It's still terrible. It's really what information, what additional information, what optional information can be collected from these particular events. So when I collect any of these events, I can go through and I can capture additional information such as the database ID or database name. Is it a system session or a user session? I can grab my SQL text so I can see exactly what has been executed. Here's the thing. There's a whole bunch of things in here I've never used. I've never collected a call stack. I've never collected context info. I've never collected things like a T-SQL stack or a task time. There are some things in extended events that I think are advanced features. There are things that I think are applicable to very specific actions or situations. I haven't used them all, and I'm okay with that. Don't be intimidated thinking, I have no idea what this does, so I'm just going to walk away and go back to Profiler. Use what you know, build on that, and add in the more advanced features as you need them. So that's it. That's how we've created our events. We can add in filters. Now we go to data storage. This is really similar to that save to file, save to table, except extended events calls them a few different things. I wish that they would put better names in this drop-down. What you'll probably want to really be concerned with is this one, event file. That means save it to a file. Some other options that you have, though. The ring buffer target is an asynchronous in memory. target, and it will just capture the information you need in memory. Yes, that uses memory, so don't use it on a memory-constrained box. Also, you're not going to want to use that for large sets of data that you're gathering. The ring buffer may not capture all of your information, especially if it is constrained on memory. It's good for really quick, really simple sessions, but that's about it. More advanced are things like event counter and histogram. These are things where you can specify, for example, event counter, you could count all of the database creation that happened. It wouldn't give you any specific or any more information about it. It would simply tell you, while you ran this session, 72 instances of this event occurred. Sometimes that's all you need to know. Wouldn't you rather have extended events do all the hard work of aggregating for you rather than you having to come through and do that later? Histogram is very similar to event counter, but what that does is, say you want to track all of the deadlocks that occur, but rather than tracking it in one specific database, you want to see how many happened in each database on your system. You would set it up to group. It's basically the event counter grouped by something. So I can see which database has the most deadlocks or which database has the most login failures. Pretty useful, a little bit more advanced, but pretty useful. Again, the one I use the majority of the time, the one you'll probably want to use the majority of the time is the event file. Notice that it says click here to add a target. Yes, you can do more than one at a time. So file name on server, it's going to ask basically where do you want to save this file. I'm going to type in my destination. Otherwise, it'll save it to the default in your Microsoft SQL Server folder. Max file size, just like we had with Profiler. Can enable file rollover. Here I can even though set a max number of files. That way it doesn't run away and fill up my C drive or my D drive. Because if you've never had that happen to you, you're lucky. Last but not least, there's this advanced tab. We can choose, I only want to lose a single event. We can choose our dispatch latency. We can choose our max memory size. Again, more advanced options. These are really great things once you're really good with extended events and once you move really high performing sessions. Most of the time, I just click OK. So one thing I'm going to do here, I'm not going to click OK right away. Whereas with Profiler, I would start the session and then I would be able to script it out. I don't have to do that. With extended events and the new session dialog box, I can say script to a new query editor window and it will script out my session automatically. Let's click OK to get this started. Now you'll notice that in Object Manager under Sessions, you can see Capture All Queries. It's automatically started after we clicked OK. That's exactly what we chose on that first screen. We can view our data a couple of different ways. One option I can do is right-click and select Watch Live Data. Not much going on here. I would have to connect to my database and run a couple of queries. Oh wait, did I already save that one? It's somewhere in here. Yes, use AdventureWorks. I'm going to select all, and my live data will catch up. One of the nice things about the extended event session, it's asynchronous. You might see a little bit of a delay between when things happen and when they show up on screen here. That's okay. To me, again, it's fine that I'm not seeing that data right up front. Another option is I can expand my session and I can see all of those different targets I had saved. So I can see event file, and if I had an event counter I could see it, and I can right click and view target data. Oh no, a damaged buffer was found. That's unusual. I swear I didn't get that when I practiced this. All right, let's take a look at one other thing then. The event session creation statement as opposed to the trace setup. Trace, we have no idea what we are looking at unless we have these trace ID numbers memorized. Gonna tell you, decade of working with SQL Server and I still don't. Extended events. I know exactly what I'm looking at. RPC completed, statement completed, batch completed, and SQL statement completed. I can see for each of those I'm capturing the database name, whether it's a system option or not, and what the SQL text was. I can see exactly what my filters are for each of them. Remember, I selected or highlighted all of those and set the same predicate on each of them. You can set different predicates on different events. Very fancy. And I can even see my target here. And I see what my problem was. I did not put in a .xel. If we go to our trace, we can see, or if I go to that folder, d:\trace, I can see that I had my capture all queries trace file, and here is my extended events file. XEL, it's a version of XML. So that is how you create an extended events session. Again, you can access it through Object Explorer by expanding Management and Sessions. You can right-click and choose New Session. The searching capabilities are some of my favorites. The different types of targets are also another favorite of mine. So that's a crash course in using extended events versus using Profiler. So what are some of the things to note? Use that new session option. Use the event search box and script it out and review it. Much like you would save those trace files to be able to run a trace against more than one server, you would do exactly the same thing with this extended event session that I've scripted out. By creating this event session, I can save this. It's just a .sql file. You'll see I have it there already. I can then open that up on any other server and execute it. You can still filter. So if you want to save a particular database ID, particular user, specific things, like I said, 10,000 milliseconds of CPU or more than X amount of logical reads in a specific database, you can absolutely narrow it down. You can save your results to a file. You can open that file later then, which is one of the beautiful things. Say you need to create a session that's going to run from 3 to 5 a.m. and you don't want to be awake to start it and awake to stop it and then awake to view that information at that time. No problem. Set up an agent job to start and stop at a specific time, review the data later. And as I mentioned, you can even create templates. It actually took me a little bit to figure out how you do that in extended events, but once you have the session started and running, you would right-click and export session, and that is going to save it in the default SQL Server Management Studio folder, and it would save it as an XML template. So that is a possibility with extended events. One of the other beautiful things that I love about extended events versus Profiler is that post-processing versus pre-processing. This is one of the most important things about it and why extended events is so much more efficient. Now, these aren't the technical terms for it, and this is not the full map of all of the steps either a trace or an extended event session go to run, but essentially, we start our session, we gather our information, and SQL Server outputs it. Now, note that with trace, can't quite click, with trace, it did post-processing. So it would gather all of the information. It gathered all of the queries that ran through the system. It gathered all of the deadlocks. It gathered all of the errors. After the information was collected and in its buffers, then it would apply the predicates against it and only show you what you selected. It gathered everything and only showed you some things. Extended events does pre-processing. As a query comes in, it evaluates that against its predicates. Is it against this specific database? Nope, don't even bother with it. Did this query run for 9,907 milliseconds? Yes. Didn't hit that 10 millisecond mark? Boom, don't even bother with it. By doing pre-processing, extended events is much more efficient, and that is why I like it as opposed to trace. Let's talk security for a moment, because I've gotten questions about this. People ask me, don't I need SA rights? Well, you kind of did anyway with profiler or trace. The profiler and trace, you needed the alter trace, which was just a version of control server. With extended events 2008 and 2008 R2, you needed to give the user the control server permission. Control server is SA with the ability to just set deny on an object. With extended events 2012 and greater, there's a new category called alter any event session. So to give a user access to run an extended event session, you simply grant them the server level permission, alter any event session. I've done that. Like I said, I have profiler user and extended events user, so let's take a look at some differences. Say that I am connected as a profile user. I can expand databases. I can see what's in my AdventureWorks database, and I can see all of the tables there. I can look at client A's database. I can look at client B's database. If I was connected to new query, I could, again, forgive me, I'm writing terrible SQL, select star from sales.sales order header. I can view that information. Okay, maybe that's more rights than we wanted someone to have. What's the difference with extended events user? Given that alter any event session, let me refresh my list of databases. I can see the databases, but the user doesn't have access to the tables, the data, etc. If I were to try to connect and select from, sales.sales order header, boom, I don't have access. Applying the correct permissions to the user that alter any event session is more secure. So DBAs, don't be afraid to give your developers that alter any event session. It allows them to create, start, stop, and modify sessions, but it's not like they have SA access. They can't do other things to the server, they can't create databases, they can't view databases. Another inevitable question I get, well, Jess, since extended events is so much more, since it performs so much better than profiler, does this mean I can run it in production? I still consider it running with scissors, but I consider it the safe, blunt-nosed kid's scissors. If you are going to be creating an extended event session that's going to capture 20 different events with no predicates, no, don't run it in production. That's a terrible idea. If you, however, have created a very finite extended event session where you're capturing just a few select events with a well-defined predicate, and you've tested it in a development environment to ensure that it isn't bogging down the performance there, yes, it's okay to run it in production, and I have done that. Now, as I mentioned, some features didn't transition over from Profiler to extended events, for better or for worse. First off, that save to table feature, you know what? That one was never my favorite anyway. And there is an option in extended events to export the results to a table. You can start a session, then you can view the event file target data, and you can right-click and export to a table. Guess what? This is a terrible idea. You want to, I want to get rid of the pen. There we go. If you would do this, you would see the option to select a database and select a table, but it's a terrible idea. Much like in Profiler, writing to a table was a really I/O intensive operation. It still is here, so it's terrible to use on busy production databases. Other things that I've seen happen or heard reported happening. A temp file gets created on the C drive, and if you leave this session just running for a long period of time, that can fill up your C drive and cause serious problems. The other problem is that if you have multiple files that you've created, you have to load them one at a time. It doesn't load multiple. So saving to a table is a terrible idea in Profiler, and it's still a terrible idea in extended events. You could set up a trace to be stopped at a specific time right in the Profiler screen. You can't do that with the extended events new session dialog box, but it's really easy because to start and stop sessions, you use this alter event session state equal to start or state equal to stop statement. So you could just create an agent job that would start it at a specific time and end it at a specific time. And again, you can script these out so that they can be published across multiple servers. Now, one of my favorite features was the ability to correlate the data with Perfmon. So if you are running a performance monitor collection and a Profiler trace at the same time, you could view them together in the Profiler interface. This screen is intentionally left blank. There is no option to do that I know of with extended events, and I ask every couple of months on Twitter. Nothing exists. Legend has it that the team at Microsoft that created extended events had no idea this existed in Profiler. I feel bad for them, and I feel bad for those of us that are missing out. If someone would like to write this as an add-in, you'll have my eternal gratitude. But despite missing those couple of features, again, extended events is still much better than a corresponding Profiler or trace. So you're thinking, Jess, this is great. I'm really glad you showed me how to create a new session and all of these new features. But what about all of those existing traces that I have? If you've been using Profiler for some time, you most likely do have some of those .SQL files. How do you convert them to an extended event session? Microsoft has created some internal tables that help you map the trace events to extended events, which is one of the hardest things in the world to not trip over saying. I have a query that will allow you to see this. This is one of the scripts that I'll be providing for you guys to download. So this is a query I have borrowed from Books Online and refined, and I know that I'm going to want to comment that out, add this one in, and I'm going to use some system tables like trace events, trace extended events, event map, and columns to pull back the information about all of the trace classes versus the extended events, event class, the trace column versus the extended event action. So if you are used to choosing a specific extended or trace event class, if you regularly do things like pick auto stats, there is a matching extended events event Do you use trace for cursors? Well, all of that has come over. Cursor open, cursor open. So there's a full-on map for all of the hundreds of some events that existed in Profiler, and they did come over to extended events. If you're looking at a trace file, you can, add in a where clause to say, oh, my typing is terrible today, as usual, where your specific trace event name is equal to a specific one that you're used to using, and find out what you would select when creating that new session. So that's great. It does give you a mappable list of items to go to from trace to extended events. But that's really just a starting point. There's actually a good method to take an existing trace, open it up, view it, and convert it to a session. It's all in T-SQL, so bear with me, but I am going to walk you through this because I think it's important. I'm going to open up a trace file that I have. It's one that I use to capture recompiles. Now note, by looking at this, I have no idea what events I'm capturing. I have to walk through a few steps. Execute the existing script to create the SQL trace session, obtain the ID of the trace, use fntrace get event info to find the events and actions, use the get filter info to list the filters, and create an extended event session. Good news is that because I have that recompiles.sql file here, I don't need to start the session. I know that I am going to be looking for events 75, 37, 166. So what I would do is I would use that previous query that I have, or if I've started this, which makes it a little bit easier. See, logged in as extended events user, I can't start a trace. That's probably for good. Let's execute that. We have trace ID 2. If we declare trace ID 2 and run this query, which again is using that trace get event info and the extended events event map, and I again change my connection. There we go. Now I can see that trace event ID 37 is equal to SQL statement recompile and extended events, 75 is equal to cursor recompile, and 166 is equal to SQL statement recompile. So what you would do is take the different events and simply copy and paste them out, and then we're going to build up the T-SQL statement. So start with, and I actually show this step by step so you can see how I've created it, rather than showing you the full, rather intimidating, rather long .SQL statement all at once. I would start with my if exists create event session with its name. Then I take that one step further and add in this add event statement, adding in SQL Server dot, the name of the event columns that were pulled back from this query. Now we know that we have our events, but we also have our equivalent actions. So what information do we want to gather? Well, what we do is we come back to this query, we select our actions, right-click and copy, and we can come and just paste them into the action. Now we have to do a little bit of cleanup work. We have to do SQL Server dot in front of each of them and a comma after. But no big deal, you can work your way through that. And you do that for each of the events. So for each of your events, you're going to choose the actions and just put them in there. Now, if we're thinking through how we did this on our new session wizard, we know that we also have to add a target. That's the last statement that gets added in. Add target. The formal name is of the event file is package0.asynchronous file target, and then you would put in your file names here. So remove the d:/recompiles and put in your information. So by simply starting your trace, using this query here and the mapping within SQL Server to find the matching events and actions from trace to extended events, and by simply copying and pasting, building up from your create session to adding events to adding actions, and then last but not least, adding in your target, piece by piece you can take your existing trace files and making them into extended events sessions. By running through this full demo, once you download the code, you'll be able to see how that works. One thing to keep in mind, and I'm going to keep emphasizing this, SQL Server 2008 had 180 events for trace. SQL Server 2016 still has 180 events for trace. Notice how many more extended events get added. We're up to over 1,000 as of SQL Server 2016. It's not just that Profiler is replaced by extended events. Extended events is a whole new framework with a lot more options. And I know, I just heard you come on. I know that we're hitting noon, and thank goodness I'm at my last slide here. Basically, your action items here. Identify your top traces. Identify what your top uses are for Profiler. Determine what extended events can replace those trace events. And step by step, just walk through recreating them. The really important thing I want everyone to remember is just start small. Again, I didn't just one day say, done, not going to use Profiler anymore. It took me a few months of converting, one trace to an extended event session, seeing how it worked, to thinking, I was going to solve this problem with Profiler. Let's try to figure out how we would solve it with extended events to get in there. And if you have questions, you can certainly reach out to me via email, Twitter, or LinkedIn.
Well, Jess, we've got quite a few questions. If you want to open up your...
we do.
Open up your screen, and I'll just let you pick them out, whichever ones. Jess is going to try to answer everything she can today, and anything she can't, she's going to try to blog about it or try to answer them later. So,
let's see. We had a few audio problems.
Yeah, I wish I could mark those out to where you didn't have to look at those.
Yeah. All right, so a quick question. Can we use the extended events add-in for SQL Server 2008 R2? Great question. So back in SQL Server 2008 R2 days, Jonathan Cahias, who is presenting your September 1st session on Service Broker, created an extended events GUI. You can absolutely use it. It doesn't really look like what I presented here today, but it is an option if you want the GUI for SQL Server 2008 R2.
That was a nice segue.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that when I grabbed it. It just occurred to me. Bill asks a good question. From the standpoint of a developer trying to learn how well triggers, stored procedures, etc. are performing during development before going into production, is there a good predefined profile to start with? There is, in fact, a good template. So if we go into that new session, the template I would choose there would be query detail tracking. If you choose one of these templates, you can go into events and see all of the events that are chosen. You can go to configure and see, what information is being captured about each of them. That's where I would start as a developer, Bill. How much lag is experienced when viewing the extended events session live data? A great question. There can be up to 30 seconds of lag. So if you need something really, truly up to date, if it's critical, you're going to want to use one of the targets that is synchronous, but understand that that will have a performance impact as well. Mike wants to know if I can demo how to look at the data captured by the extended event. Go ahead and a better way to do that is to go out to Google, now that it's been around for almost 20 years, search for Jes Borland, do extended events data. I've written up a full blog post on how to query existing extended events data with XML. Gosh, there are so many questions. I hope I managed, let's see, is the code in the demo specific for SQL 2014? No, you can use the code in the demo for 2012 or 2014. I haven't tested it against 2008 or 2008 R2. All right, so I think the rest of the questions are a lot of it depends and more extensive answers. So I'm going to try to reach out to people either individually with very specific questions, or I'll have a couple blog posts in the coming weeks on some of these questions.
Okay, that sounds good. The session will be recorded, so you can, if you don't have her contact information, you can go back and look it up. It should be up in about a day or two. By the way, Jess, great presentation. I think that last slide, the next to the last slide where I came in, where you were showing how many events are covered by profile and extended events, that's the best. That's the best driver, because you're not going to be able to troubleshoot SQL Server as you get.
It's a big difference, for sure.
Yeah, huge difference. It's growing dramatically. So that's enough right there for me. Anyway. Lori C. Is the winner today that will be put into the pool for next week. There will be no more people in it, so we'll announce that at the first of the session to get an extra $200. And the winner of the past comp will be notified in a couple of days. And be sure, whatever email address that you signed up with, be sure you check your email and monitor that, and we'll get that out as quickly as we can. We're going to have to say that if you don't get back to us via that email, we'll have to give the session away to somebody else within a week. Just because if people are going to pass, they need to go ahead and start planning at this point. Go ahead and sign up for Going Asynchronous with Service Broker with Jonathan Kihis. 2 weeks from now from SQL Skills. That'll be a great presentation. And I guess that's it. Jess, again, thanks. Great presentation.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. And again, if you have questions, please contact me. I'd love to get your feedback as well. Have a great afternoon, everyone.